buenas tardes.
Hola.
Las actividades de su evento. Es para mí un verdadero gusto presentar a nuestras siguientes ponentes en esta plenaria. La doctora Jo Minor es profesora asociada y directora del Centro de Autoacceso de la Universidad de Estudios Internacionales de Kanda, Japón. Posee un doctorado en Educación de Enseñanza del Inglés como lengua extranjera por la Universidad de Exeter, en Reino Unido, y una maestría en Lingüística aplicada por el Trinity College en Dublín, Irlanda. Ha sido profesora de inglés en diferentes países y presentado conferencias y talleres relacionados con la autonomía alrededor del mundo. También se ha dedicado a fomentar el aprendizaje en centros de autoacceso desde 1996 y es la editora y fundadora de la revista Studies in Self-Access Learning Journal. Ha editado varios libros sobre el tema de autonomía del aprendizaje y 2 sobre la asesoría en el aprendizaje de lenguas. Su libro más reciente, en coautoría con la doctora Satoko Kato, es Reflective Dialogue, Advising in Language Learning, publicado por Routledge, Nueva York, en 2015. También tenemos la presencia de la doctora Satoko Kato, quien es profesora de carrera y lectora en el Research Institute for Learner Autonomy Education y en la Universidad de Estudios Internacionales de Kanda. También es profesora en la Escuela de Graduados de Ciencias del Lenguaje de esta institución, donde imparte el tema de autonomía del alumno y autonomía del profesor, como parte del programa de maestría en enseñanza del inglés. Ha llevado a cabo más de 3.800 sesiones de asesoría en los últimos 12 años como asesora, con el objetivo de promover la autonomía del alumno. Actualmente se está enfocando en desarrollar e implementar programas de formación de asesores a nivel nacional e internacional y, como ya se mencionó, es coautora del libro Reflective Dialogue, Advising in Language Learning. Por favor, demos una bienvenida a nuestras ponentes.
Hola y muy buenas tardes desde Japón. Mi nombre es Jo Minor y estoy aquí con mi compañera Satoko Kato. Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes para este encuentro. Muchas gracias por habernos invitado a participar. Por supuesto, preferimos estar allí en personas, pero no ha sido posible esta vez. De todas formas, estamos muy felices de estar con ustedes. Y ahora, si nos permiten, vamos a cambiar a inglés, ¿vale? Para la presentación. Okay, let's get started in English. Very nice to be here. So, Okay, so here's a QR code in case you want to download the slides, and I'll show it again later. Okay, so we've got 3 purposes or 3 aims for our presentation. So one, to examine, what is reflective dialogue and how can we facilitate it? The second one, how might we find opportunities to engage learners in reflective dialogues in self-access centres? And then finally, how can we prepare educators to facilitate reflective dialogues in self-access centres? Okay, so I'm going to do the first part, and Satoko will mainly do number 3, but also touch on 2 as well. All right, so part 1 is me, and I'm going to be talking about spaces and dialogue for supporting learners. So first of all, let's just clear up some definitions, what I mean by learner autonomy, just really briefly. So I see it overall, the capacity to take charge of one's own learning. Of course, we know it's more nuanced than that, but just a very basic one. And self-access centres, what do I mean by self-access centres? So I consider them to be person-centred, social learning environments that actively promote language learner autonomy, both within and outside the space. And let's take a look at what are some of the essential spaces in a self-access centre. Maybe you can think to yourself, imagine your self-access centre or your ideal one. What would be some of the essential spaces? For example, you need some materials, so spaces to hold books and materials. Have a think for a couple of minutes. What else would you put in your self-access centre? Okay, well, maybe you'll have some spaces for your worksheets, so you can tailor your activities for the students. Maybe you've got some study spaces, workshop spaces, or Perhaps you've got some PCs where you can do activities like teletandem. I think maybe you recognize this picture. It's from UNAM here, from the Mediateca. Maybe you've got spaces for groups to work together. Maybe there's a place for people to get tutoring or expert help with their languages. Maybe there's a conversation lounge for people to practice the languages that they're learning. Hopefully there's an advising desk where people can meet learning advisors and get help on the learning process. And maybe there are some areas where students can present things and share things together. So of course we know there are many, many more, right? So these are just some, and we're going to talk about dialogue. So I'm going to choose some of these in a while to talk about how we can facilitate reflective dialogue in these spaces. But first, let's look at what is reflective dialogue. And so this is a definition based on one that Satoko and I have developed over the last few years. So advising in language learning is the intentional use of one-to-one dialogue to promote deeper thought with the aim of promoting language learner autonomy. Okay, I think you know that. But and so this is originally based on a socio-cultural view of learning. So in this model, the learner's doing a lot of the talking, the advisor is reflecting and listening. So it's the dialogue between them is the really powerful part that helps people transform through this dialogue and develop a deeper sense of what learning is and what it means to them. And the internal dialogue is also, of course, very important, as are the tools around the people doing the thinking and the talking and the context where this takes place. So this rich context could be a self-access center, it could be a classroom, or it could be many other places that students choose to use to engage in language learning and use. And Satoko and I developed the notion of transformational advising. So we wanted to show that, you know, advising goes beyond just giving tips and hints. It's a transformational process. So an advisor supports a learner going beyond improving language proficiency. The learner's existing beliefs are challenged in order to raise awareness of learning, translate the learner's awareness into action, and finally make a fundamental change in the nature of learning. And I'm sure you've seen this in your own work. When you work with learners over many years or many months even, you see changes as they reflect and think deeply about who they are and how they're learning. So we call this transformational advising. Okay, so I promised we'd talk about 5 areas and see how dialogue can be facilitated. So let's choose these 5. So the Learning Help Desk, I think it's the most obvious one, of course. This is where the advising mostly takes place. But I think reflective dialogues can be incorporated into places that offer language study too. Maybe the conversation lounge, a tutoring center like a writing center or a conversation practice desk, in general study spaces, and also in online environments. Okay, so we'll take them one by one. So let's look at Learning Help Desk first. So this is our Learning Help Desk at Canada University. And the learning advisors take shifts. So we're there throughout the day to help students on a drop-in basis. I'm sure you have something similar. So what kind of questions do students ask at the Learning Help Desk? Many things. I really like doing a shift at the Learning Help Desk because you never know what you're going to get. So it's always interesting, challenging for me. So let's look at an example. But let's look at an example if your role as a teacher. So this is a way of contrasting, you know, the work of advisors and the work of teachers. So when you're in teacher mode, you know, a conversation might go something like this. You know, I'm working on this grammar book. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. Where should I start? How much do I need to study? So a student's often got lots of questions. You know, they're wondering about the best way to study. And as a teacher, you know, you feel you have a responsibility. You have all this knowledge about how to teach and how to learn. You want to pass it on. So the instinct is to say, oh, this book doesn't seem right for you, or why don't you try this one, or start from the verb chapter tense, that's easy, or try to finish a chapter a week. Because you know this makes sense, this is great advice. But is the student going to benefit from this kind of directive advice giving? She's likely to say, okay, I'll do it. And she might, but she isn't invested in the process. You know, she'll do it because the teacher has told her to, or maybe she won't do it. Okay, so with advising, the student's much more invested. So the dialogue might go something like this. Well, actually, maybe you can complete the dialogue. Imagine a student has come to see you and she says, I'm using this grammar book. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. Now put your learning advisor hat on, and how would you proceed with the dialogue? Can I give you 5 minutes? Sorry, it's so short. And talk to the person next to you. What kind of questions, or how would you handle this as an advisor? Okay, so 5 minutes to have a think. So please talk to the person next to you. I wonder if I'll be able to hear you. Maybe not, but please do it. Okay, I can't actually hear you, but I'm communicating with the organizers, and I hear that you were talking about the task, so thank you very much. So I'll just give you a moment just to finish up. Okay, can I continue? I'm just going to continue, okay. All right, so I'm sure you had lots of great ideas of how you could handle this. And I think the most important thing is to try to tune into what the learner really needs at that time. So, you know, you might want to say, oh, I see, repeat something back like, oh, so you don't know what you're doing is right. So you let the learner hear it from your perspective as well. And the learner might say, yeah, I've only finished one chapter, so she's giving you more information. And the advisor might say something, can you tell me more? You know, open questions. So rather than just dive in and give advice, find out more about what the student is doing, you know, how she's feeling and so on. And even when my motivation's high, I can't work on it. And, you know, why do you think you cannot study? And so on. So you're asking much deeper questions. And then what you can see happening is the learner then starts to reflect deeply. And of course, it's a much longer conversation. This could go on several sessions as well. You probably won't cover everything in one session, but the learner is much more likely to be invested in the process and feeling listened to. Now, Satoko is going to go into more detail about the strategies you can use in her session. So I'll move on for now. Okay, but I wanted to show really the difference between advising and teaching in a little more detail. Okay, so what other questions do students get at the Learning Help Desk? I'm sure you get millions of things. So, you know, maybe sometimes the student's feeling like this, a little sad, or, you know, not sure what to do. And then questions might be something like, I can't enjoy English, or I don't have time to study, or I feel alone, or I don't know where to start. Okay, many things. But then students might feel like this, and they might want to, they're quite autonomous and they want to go further. So English classes are easy for me. How can I learn more? Or how can I push myself? Or how can I make the most of my time? Or questions like this. So you can't assume that the student always has a problem. You never know what you're going to get. And so how do you respond? How do you know how to respond to these different questions? Well, you know, many ways, but you might want to think about it in terms of a trajectory. So maybe if a student's at the getting started stage at the beginning, and she's not very aware of what to do, or maybe she's lacking autonomy or motivation, you would deal with her differently than a student who's very aware or moving towards transformation or autonomy. So we really have to work with the student where they're at. And through the listening process, you get more information about them and how they're feeling. And then gradually through the reflection and dialogue process, they move towards autonomy and reflection, autonomy and transformation. More about this in a minute. So some features of advising discourse: it's intentional, it's not random. You are intentionally using language to help people promote more deep, reflect more deeply. And it's continuous, as in it probably goes on for many months, years. It's not just a one-off conversation usually, although it can be. Promotes autonomy, and it's sensitive to psychological processes as well, okay, and feelings and emotions. And let me just take you through quickly some of the other spaces in a self-access centre. So one is a conversation lounge, which you might have. It's become, a big feature of self-access centres in Japan, particularly, and I have seen them in Mexico too. Often in Japan, the students really don't have any other place to practice the language that they're learning. And so we have a busy English language conversation lounge called the English Lounge. This is it. Students call it Yellow Sofa. You can see why. And what do they tend to do? Is the first question you ask before you start thinking about what dialogue can I facilitate? What do students do there? Well, we did a 2-year ethnography where we actually studied this very carefully, what students do. And sometimes they just hover on the peripheries, they don't join, or they wait for the teachers to lead, or they play games that don't require them to use any English, or they work on individual activities, or they have just surface level conversations that don't challenge them. Okay, we notice a lot of this. But we also notice this: students leading challenging discussions, mentoring others, or observing others and are being influenced by them, or indicating a sense of belonging in a space and demonstrating high levels of autonomy. So after our study of interviewing and observing for 2 years, we noticed all of these things and many others. And it led us to come up with another trajectory. And this one is for the use of the conversation lounge. So, 0 is they're not using the lounge at all for various reasons. They're not confident enough, or they don't think it's useful for them, or they've made assumptions about the kind of students who go there. That's not like me. And they might start becoming a user of the lounge. Often they go with their friends, or they're awkward and shy, and they go there to talk to teachers or native speakers. And they've developed confidence after some time. And then 2, they start reflecting a little bit. They start noticing other students' language. They might change their opinions about the purpose, but they're aware of their language. They start becoming aware of their language. And at that point, many people stop coming. They feel they've got what they need from there and they move on to something else. But if they stay, then they move on to number 3 and they start influencing and supporting others. They really feel like they belong in the space and they feel a sense of responsibility to help others to access it. And then finally, 4th years, like seniors in our university, they have outgrown the purpose of the conversation lounge. They no longer need the conversation practice, but they feel really a sense of responsibility for others to feel comfortable there. And they're looking for new generations of leaders as well. So we've seen all of these in our centre. So, everyone's going to be different, but I encourage you to do a kind of observation so you know why the students are there and what they need at different times. So as you might imagine, students will need different things depending on where they're at in the trajectory of using this lounge. And to support this, important to provide a supportive environment and to support conversation through strategy awareness, maybe conversation prompts, hold events that make it easy for people to join. Nurturing student leaders is really good. When students have been coming in more often, encourage them to take more ownership and leadership. And this is done really subtly. It wouldn't work if you just told people to do it, but encouraging them to develop these interests naturally works really well. And allow space for these natural communities to form and engage in them as reflective dialogue as part of the regular conversation. Okay, so it's a conversation lounge. So often students, have their questions they want to talk about. But I always go further. Why do you want to know that? Or what did you expect from when you asked me this? Or how does that compare with your experience? So encouraging students to go further, deeper, and also think about, so how satisfied do you feel with your conversation today? Is there anything you can do to make it better next time? Okay, so even though it's not an advising service, you kind of sneak in advising where you can. A tutoring centre is a little more tricky because students are going there for writing help or, you know, particular pronunciation help or grammar help or something like that. So they're not there for advising. And so you have to really be a bit more careful. So think about, again, in your situation, why do students come? And then use that as a basis. You might want to observe or do some research to find out more about why they come. And then think about how you can build advising into that. So often it's, in our case, they want help with homework, or they have a quick question, or they want to practice conversation, or they want to get a good mark with their essay, you know, very practical things. And we, of course, the most important thing, support their immediate language goals and what they've come there for, but build in some reflective dialogue as well. You know, questions like this. So we talked about XYZ. How confident do you feel about this issue now? Or what will you do next time you have a question like this? Or is there anything you can do to further develop your knowledge? So I think I'm trying to help students not just to keep coming back to the desk every time they have a question about grammar, but thinking about how they can support themselves as well. Okay, study spaces is our next one. This is in our self-access centre at Camden as well. And so first question, of course, why do students come? In our case, we did some interviews and survey last July to find out this. So this is based on 208 interviews and 280 survey responses. And here are some of the main reasons students come to the areas. Sometimes they just want to study alone or with friends, and there's they don't want anything else. Many times it's to feel part of the community, just so people are around them. And in many cases, they are hoping that someone will talk to them in English. They're hoping someone will initiate. They're too shy to do it themselves. So we found this out from our study. And so what we do, we engage students in what Satomi Shibata calls micro-counseling, which it might be just a short comment or a question. Oh, that's an interesting book. Oh, what are you working on right now? Something very short, but then many micro-counseling sessions can lead to much deeper reflection over time. And we include sort of reflection questions and notices on cards around the cell. So our colleague Yuri has written notices all the way up the stairs. One of her questions is, how can you be the best today? So as you go up the stairs, you're reflecting on this. What's one thing you want to achieve in your life? So engaging in reflection throughout the centre somehow. And then in online environments. And first of all, you know, think about what kinds of environments do students use for learning languages. Of course, there may be many. So let's just think of 3 for the moment. So they could be doing teletanzen, like one-to-one conversations with partners, or online forums where they have to type and interact and answer sometimes challenging questions, and social media. I think these are things that we can facilitate for language learners, you know, teachers or learning advisors or self-access staff. Can definitely do the first 2. Social media, I'm not sure. Maybe this is something that students don't want us to be involved in at all. But these are things that, you know, have been shown to give the chance, of course, for reflective dialogue. And my advice there is to think of dialogue as a pre, during, and a post task. So maybe before the conversation, we can help students prepare, like what do they want to achieve in this conversation? And will they be able to express what they want to say? How satisfied do you feel? So this is afterwards. And what can you do better next time? So you're building advising into the tasks to help people think more deeply. So it's not just the task, it's the whole process, before, during, and after. And this can be done with any speaking task, but it works really well with online environments as well. Okay, so that's my part done. Just to recap. So we looked at definitions of learner autonomy. We looked at self-access and advising. We looked at key components of a SALC, and then ways to engage the learners in reflective dialogue in 5 examples of places in a SALC. So you're going to go much more deeper now with Satoko. I'll hand you over. Okay. Thanks, Satoko.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Okay, yes. Thank you, Joe. So my part is about reflective dialogue to support learners, advisors, and teachers. And I will address How do learning advisors promote reflective dialogue? And what strategies do they use? And how can we apply these strategies to support teachers and advisors for their professional development? Okay. So Joe talked about promoting autonomy through dialogue, which we call reflective dialogue. And reflective dialogue starts with having a reflective question. So we need to have good questions to deepen our reflection, right? And good reflective questions requires learners to think before giving response. So for example, questions like, how do you feel about your learning so far? For when you ask learners feeling and emotion, they have to think before giving answers. Or something like, if you're learning while climbing up a mountain, where are you at now? We call this kind of question metaphor questions, and metaphor questions are really good tools to help learners think out of the box. For example, we have what if question, what we call what if questions, such as, what if your entire life was a storybook? What title would best fit? So these kind of questions are questions that students don't encounter in their daily lives properly, but they really help them think deeper. So we advisors are, it is better for advisors to know a variety of questions to ask their students. And it's not only about the type of question, but also the order of the question is very important. So if you look at the slide, the top of the pyramid, it says more powerful. For example, why, how, and what questions are more powerful than who, when, where, or yes, no questions. So powerful questions are such as, why do you think you couldn't do it? Right. This kind of question is quite powerful. So if you keep using these words, you might put your student in a position to defend themselves. So we try to scaffold our questions starting from the bottom of the pyramid, such as yes, no questions, and try to climb up the pyramid step by step. So let me show you how we actually do it. Okay. So for example, if you're an advisor, you can say, were you able to carry out your plan? So this is yes, no questions. It's quite easy to answer the question. So student might say, no, I was busy. So this is quite typical excuse that we hear every day. No, I was busy. I couldn't concentrate on my study well. So the next question could be something like, when was the most difficult time for you to study? So by answering this question, students start to recall her memory, such as, when I'm studying late night at home. So she's trying to recall her memory, right? So the next question could be something like, what makes this difficult for you, right? So student starts to analyze herself, not just recalling the memory, but she starts to analyze herself. Something like, usually I can't concentrate on when I sit at my desk. So advisors can follow up with the question, how do you feel about it? You can see that it's getting more powerful. So student will say something like, every time I study at my desk, I feel like I'm going to fail the exam again. So by answering your question, you can see the student started to notice something. Then advisor noticed that there's some gap between what she had said in the beginning. The student said the reason is she's busy, but then she realized something and she started to talk about her anxiety. So as an advisor, you want students to make links between her findings. So then you can ask something like, you said the reason is because you were busy, but it sounds like there's something different going on. So why do you think you couldn't carry out your plan? Then you can lead your student to a deeper reflective process. And this is how we scaffold our questions. So starting from a bottoms up pyramid and trying to climb up little by little, okay? And when we do advising, these are the things we keep in mind. We try not to fix the learner's problems, right? And we focus on learner's learning process itself and try to pay attention to learner's feelings and emotion as much as possible. As a teacher or advisor, we're tempted to focus on the fact that about the student's learning. For example, how many hours have you studied or how many pages? But we try to focus on learners' feelings and emotion first in our advising sessions. And through these sessions, we help learners face themselves. We listen to their fears and excitements, worries, and sometimes value in their lives. And Joe mentioned, we call this type of advising transformational advising because it goes like beyond the language learning. We help students to face their existing values and try to challenge them and help them translate their awareness into action and try to fundamentally change the nature of their learning. So this is how we do it. And transformational advising is divided into 4 learning trajectories. And in each developmental phase, we advisors interact with students differently. And we do provide advisors training to how to deal with students in each developmental stages. And in the basic course, we covered almost like 12 advising strategies and 6 techniques in order to promote reflective dialogue, smoothly in the first session. And today, I would like to introduce the basic advising strategies that we introduced in that really an introductory course. And these are very similar, famous or common advising strategies, which are repeating, restating, summarizing, emphasizing, and complementing. And I think we all know these 5 strategies. They're so simple. But I can tell that these simple 5 strategies are so powerful if you use them intentionally. So now I would like to cover like each strategy briefly. So first is repeating. So repeating is about repeating key phrases that the learner has said using more or less the same words. For example, if the learner comes to you and says, "I am having a hard time reading English books," in a gloomy voice, as an advisor, you plead like, "Oh, you're having a hard time." But here's the point. You don't just repeat the phrase or like a word that the learner has uttered. You try to repeat the emotion as well so that you can show that you're listening to the learner and dialogue becomes two-way. And the next one is restating. For example, if the learner said that, "I am lazy and I cannot carry out my plan for more than 3 days. It's only when I am in a positive mode that I can concentrate on my study." So as an advisor, you want to restate this phrase. For example, you can say something like, "I see, it seems that you know yourself well. You have a clear line between when you are in a study mode and when you are not." Okay, I think you realize something. That advisor is not just trying to restate, but trying to put learners' utterance into a little bit towards positive side. So this is not just restating, but it's something like helping learners to see things from different ways. So by restating, learners can reconfirm and see the same situation from a different perspective by having advisor repeating what she or he has said. And next one is summarizing. It's about bringing together the main points, and it shows that you're listening to the learner and it establishes mutual understanding. And we use summarizing when learners keep talking. There are some learners, like really talkative students, and sometimes you want to stop them. So in that case, we use summarizing. Or we use summarizing when we want to ask a powerful question. So right before asking really like a strong question, we try to summarize what the student has said so far. So, but we try not to summarize based on our assumption. Okay, so that was summarizing. And empathizing. To understand the student's internal state and how he or she is feeling and thinking, we try to emphasize with the student. And emphasizing establishes mutual understanding, such as if the student said, "Oh, I'm waiting for the results of the TOEFL test I took last week. If I don't get over 80, I won't be able to apply for the study abroad program. This is a last chance for me and I'm worried about my score." So you can see the learner has a lot of anxiety. And an advisor, you want to show that you are empathizing with the learner. So maybe you can say something like, "Oh, I can tell how much you want to join the study abroad program. If it's your last chance, you must be feeling uneasy. I understand how worried you are." So It's different from sympathizing. So empathizing is more about putting yourself in the shoes of other person. So this is how we deal with students. And we try not to miss the point. We try to find out where, what is learned, which part of the her utterance the learner wants us to empathize with. Okay. And the last thing is complimenting, right? You might think complimenting is not an advising strategy, but it is. When we were children, I think we received compliments on any tiny thing, such as eating by oneself or walking without someone's support, or even just smiling, we get complimented. But when we grow up, it doesn't happen in our daily lives. So there are many students coming to advising session because they want to get complimented, right? So we believe complimenting is really, really powerful. Complimenting is used when a learner is trying to move on, or a learner needs to be empowered. And complimenting is not just throwing positive phrases at learners like good job, excellent, wonderful, but complimenting is some like special words said by you to that particular student. So when it comes like that, it becomes really powerful. And we help learners to feel like they are noticed and valued and feel special about themselves. Okay, so these were the 5 strategies that we usually cover in the very first session in our advisor training program. So now I would like you to use it, and we'd like to do a little activity together with you. I hope you enjoy it. So the topic of the talk we're going to do now is, I would like you to reflect on your story of the past 24 hours. Maybe you had a really busy morning, or you had good breakfast, or you attended some good conferences, presentations. Okay, try to reflect on your past 24 hours, and we would like you to do it in a pair work. Okay, can you move into the next slides? Thank you. So it's going to be a pair work, so please find a partner. It can be someone sitting next to you. It's going to be 4 minutes, and you're going to take turns. So please find a partner. And one person becomes a listener, and the other person becomes speaker. And after 4 minutes, you're going to change the roles. So if you're a listener, listen to the speaker with curiosity by using 5 strategies that we have just talked about: repeating, restating, summarizing, empathizing, and complimenting. And if you're a speaker, try to reflect on your past 24 hours and focusing on your emotion and feelings. Because when you start to talk about fact, 4 minutes flies so fast. So focus on your emotion and feelings when you talk. Okay? So I'm gonna time you. So 4 minutes, please start. Okay, now please change the roles. If you are a speaker, try to become listener, and listener becomes speaker, okay? And please do the same thing over. Okay, so let's switch roles and start. Okay, thank you, thank you. I hope you enjoyed your conversation. Were you able to use the 5 strategies? Okay, so the purpose of this activity was to help the speaker experience the state of being listened to. And in advising, we listen to learners and make a two-way conversation where learners reach a deep level of self-reflection. And in order to help them achieve that level, the first thing we need to do is to have the learner experience the state of being listened to. And this is going to build rapport and trust, which is the foundation of everything that follows in that advising dialogue, we believe. And here is the point. We believe that even if you think you are listening to the speaker, it doesn't mean anything. You have to show that you are listening to the speaker, that the speaker knows it. So the 5 strategies that we just focused on are really helpful to let them know that we are listening to them. So that's why we focus on the 5 strategies, okay? So now we've just talked about how we interact with students, but we thought that the way we use the dialogue that we use in advising can be also applied to teacher and advisor education. And we started to focus on mentoring in teacher education and advisor education. There are some good research out there which said that mentoring in teacher education promotes teachers to gain confidence and develop self-reflection and promote also mutual learning. And in advisor training, because we do one-on-one advising with students, doing mentoring and advisor education can be considered to be really, really effective way for our professional development. And we've been focusing on this field so far. And we came across with this idea of relational mentoring for mutual learning. So compared to like traditional mentoring, where an experienced mentor provides knowledge and skill to inexperienced advisors, this is something different. Like the aim of the mentoring is to promote mutual learning, and it is based on high quality relationship. It's based on strong and genuine connections, so that influence is not only about their professional life, but also it can influence their life outside their workplace as well. And outcome is expected to be mutual learning, growth, and development. And this is the kind of mentoring we want to do in advisor training, because we focus on transformational advising, and this is also about transformation in professional development. So in the past 3 years, we've been focusing on trying out relational mentoring program. And this is an example of what we do. So we take like 1.5 years to run 7 sessions altogether between mentor and mentee. And in the first session, we conduct life story interviews. So like mentee and mentor try to talk about their life or their story of lives, so that they can share their values. And after each session, we ask mentors and mentees to write reflective journals. And in 4th session, we call it collaborative reflection, exchange their diaries and try to read each other's reflection and do collaborative joint reflection together. And in 6th session, we do reverse mentoring, where we switch the role of mentor and mentee. And this was quite really a worst learning experience, because it really helped them switch their viewpoint. So mentors became mentees and mentee became mentor. That was really nice. And at the last session, we did another collaborative reflection where we asked them to like reflect on their entire learning process. And so far, it's working quite well. And we noticed that the benefit of mentoring program is, of course, about promoting mutual growth and doing the life story into to help them share their career life, career and life values. And collaborative reflection promoted mutual understanding, and reverse mentoring helped them gain perspective. And it was not only that, we hear from the participants saying that expressing really positive emotion after attending this program. Many of them said that I can't remember when was the last time I had somebody listening to me intensively. So we hear comments like it was really enriching, fulfilling, and these like emotions were called like well-being in psychology. And we believe that reflective dialogue is really promoting advisors and teachers' well-being. And the last slide is about well-being. So in our advisor education, we're trying to promote well-being as much as possible. And well-being is not just happiness, it's more than that. It means like developing as a person, being fulfilled and contributing to the community. And it equals self-acceptance, positive relationship, autonomy, environmental mastery, and purpose in life and personal growth. So when we consider advisor training, we really focus on advisors to become happy about themselves, happy about their job. So I think that is my part, and I will hand it over. Oh, I have to recap before I move on. So my talk was about how to formulate the reflective question, and we focused on 5 strategies for rapport building. And I also talked about introducing reflective dialogue in mentoring, because we want to promote autonomy and also well-being through reflective dialogue. Okay, so that was my talk. I will hand it back to Joe.
¿Tenemos una pregunta?
Sí.
Yeah, well, it's not a question, it's more a comment. And well, thank you for the conference. And okay, hi. Thank you for the conference. And well, all this information is going to help me to improve my relationship with my wife, because sometimes I'm not that a good listener, but I think it's very similar, because sometimes when you're talking with your students, you have a lot of assumptions. And well, now I can notice that, yeah, sometimes I'm going to use your strategies. I'm going to restate. I'm going to compliment. And well, thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
¿Alguien más quiere hacer una pregunta? ¿Tenemos otra pregunta? Sí, está bien. Se va a escuchar en audio, aunque no la puedan ver.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Satoko. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I'm really interested in this mentoring thing, and I would like to know if it would be possible to apply this structure also online or via, I don't know, Skype, because at the moment I don't see in my institution many people I could do with, I don't know. And then maybe you can take the chance to announce the online lab tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, because I was talking about this morning to a couple of colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you for your question and comment. Yes, most of the mentoring program we did was through Skype. So we did it online quite a lot. And because it was really difficult for us to meet in person. So I think we should put more focus on how to do effectively in online in the future, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Giovanna, for your question and for reminding us. Yeah, so on Friday, which is the middle of the night between Thursday and Friday in Mexico, Giovanna's one of our featured speakers at an online, what we call lab session. And maybe some of the organizers could provide the web link later, but it's a free online conference and we're recording it. So if you don't feel like staying up till 2 a.m. or whatever it is, you can hear it later. But there we have Giovanna Tassinari and Katia Heim from Essen, and an interview with Sarah Mercer, and about 15 short talks, all on the topic of teacher education and advisor education. So please come. Satoko will also be giving a short presentation. Sorry, I forgot. And then there'll be a journal, on a special issue of our journal, which is edited by Philip Bennett, one of our colleagues at Kanda, and Giovanna Tassinari as well. And that's the deadline for submissions for that will be at the end of August. And even if you didn't present at our online conference, you're welcome to submit a paper based on your practice or your work, and that will be published in September. So the theme of the special column or issue is teacher and advisor education for learner autonomy. So I think it must be very relevant. So maybe the organizers can share the link later. But it's all part of Relay, the Research Institute for Learner Autonomy Education. So it's our way of trying to reach the world from Japan. So please get involved. Thank you.